Today, we're busting myths, debunking the misconceptions that have somehow slipped into our collective consciousness and taken root as facts. From the battlefield to the kitchen, from the realm of technology to the world of sports, these myths are everywhere. Now consider this. The AR in AR-15 doesn't mean what you think it does. Or how about this one? The Chevy Nova, despite the stories, had no trouble being a hit in Spanish-speaking countries. Then, there's the enduring tale of the immortal Twinkie, the Thanksgiving turkey that makes you sleepy, and so many more. But here's the catch. All these stories, all these accepted truths, they're not entirely accurate. There's more to them than meets the eye. So dear listeners, are you ready to dive into the truth behind these fascinating misconceptions? Because the most astonishing part of it all is, well, you'll find out soon enough. What's up, my amazing and curious folks? It's your host Caesar here, ready to unravel mysteries together on the Curiosity Wonderland. And with me, as always, is the ever-insightful Sonia. Say hi, Sonia.
Hi, everyone. Excited to dig into today's topic.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss any of our mind-boggling episodes. Now let's dive into the fascinating world of debunked myths. It appears that we are in an era where myths and misconceptions are propagated more easily than ever before. With the internet at our fingertips, the spread of misinformation can run rampant. While this can be concerning, especially in matters of politics, social issues, and other serious topics, today we're focusing on the more lighthearted side of things. We're going to delve into some funny, quirky, and just plain weird misconceptions that we often get wrong as a society. These aren't life or death facts, but they certainly are interesting. And who knows, you might just find yourself correcting a few of your friends after this episode. So let's dive right into it. Did you know that the AR in AR-15 does not stand for what most people think it does? Surprisingly, it doesn't stand for assault rifle or automatic rifle. The AR-15 was actually developed in the late 1950s. It's a scaled-down version of the AR-10 semi-automatic rifle, both of which were developed by the Armalite company. This company had grand plans. They hoped to convince the American military to replace all their long rifles with Armalite products. But things didn't quite go as they'd hoped. Their products were rejected in favor of another rifle. Undeterred, Armalite sold its patents and trademarks for both the AR-10 and AR-15 rifle models to the Colt Manufacturing Company. Colt then made some changes to the rifle, removing some features from the original design. And by the time the patents for the gun's unique features expired in the late 1970s, other companies jumped in to start making their own semi-automatic rifles. So there you have it. The AR in AR-15 actually stands for Armalite Rifle, paying homage to the company that first developed this gun. Quite a twist, huh? Now, as I mentioned, Colt retained all the trademarks and branding to the term AR-15. They are the only manufacturer who can label their arms as such. So, while AR-15 has become a catch-all phrase for powerful semi-automatic rifles, not all of them are technically AR-15 models. If they're not made by Colt, they are knockoffs that should be known under a different name.
Can you give us an example to better understand this?
Sure, let's think of it like this. Imagine if every soda was called a Coca-Cola, but only the ones made by the Coca-Cola company were technically the real deal. Everything else, be it Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, or a supermarket's own brand, would just be imitations. They don't have the right to use the Coca-Cola name, even though they may be similar in many ways. It's the same with the AR-15. Now let's address the bigger misconception. Many people believe the AR in AR-15 stands for assault rifle or automatic rifle. These terms have come into major use in modern America, especially assault rifle, following decades of tragic mass shootings with AR-15 models and similar weapons. However, this is incorrect. The AR very simply stands for Armalite Rifle, in honor of the company that first developed the guns in the 1950s.
So where does the confusion come from?
A key factor contributing to this confusion is that the weapon was included in the Federal Assault Weapons Ban of 1994. This likely led the average person to associate its use with assault, and hence the perspective on the initials went incorrectly from there. Moving on, let's debunk another myth. This one is about cars, specifically the Chevy Nova. This was a popular small car manufactured by Chevrolet through the 1960s and 70s, and then again for a brief period in the late 1980s. It was very popular around the world, including Mexico and Latin America. Now there's a persistent myth regarding this car. The car's name, Nova, is said to have hampered sales in Spanish-speaking countries. Why? Well, Nova means doesn't go in Spanish. So it would be natural for Spanish speakers to avoid buying a car named Doesn't Go, right?
That sounds logical, but I assume there's a catch?
Absolutely. Despite the unfortunate name translation, the Nova actually sold very well in both Mexico and Latin America. The locals in those regions were looking for a small, reliable car they could navigate through crowded towns and narrow, historic city streets. And the Chevy Nova fit the bill perfectly. So there, another myth debunked. So let's emphasize this again. The Chevy Nova did not fail in Spanish-speaking countries because of the unfortunate translation. In fact, the Nova was more successful in Mexico and other Latin American countries than it was in the United States and other non-Spanish-speaking nations. It's interesting how misconceptions can persist, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. This reminds me of a party I went to last week, where someone tried to tell me the same old Nova myth. I was glad to set the record straight.
Coincidentally, I had a similar experience. I was at a car show recently and overheard someone talking about the Nova. They were so convinced that it had failed in Mexico due to the Nova translation. I tried to correct them, but they were adamant. I guess some myths are hard to bust.
Indeed. Now let's move on to another myth, this time about food. We've all heard the claim that Twinkies can survive a nuclear holocaust. Now, as humorous and extreme as this claim may be, we all should know that it is, of course, completely false. A nuclear winter would be a completely devastating event, both in the localized area where the bomb went off and for the rest of the world with all kinds of environmental fallout. Still, there's a reason Twinkies are singled out with this phony myth.
Is it because of all the preservatives they're made with?
Exactly. Twinkies seem to be made more out of preservatives and lab-created ingredients rather than actual food. So they are an easy target for this kind of myth. But let's set the record straight here. Twinkies have a shelf life of about 45 days. Stores are under strict orders to only stock Twinkies for between 7 and 10 days before replacing them with new products. So no, Twinkies cannot survive a nuclear holocaust, or centuries in your pantry for that matter. So, setting the record straight, the common claim that Twinkies remain edible for decades is false, and the myth that they will supposedly survive a nuclear explosion is extremely false. But still, the myth persists. Moving on, let's talk about another enduring myth. This one surrounds the classic Thanksgiving dinner. You know how after you eat a bunch of turkey, you quickly doze off to sleep? Many people blame this on the turkey, or more specifically on the tryptophan in the turkey.
Tryptophan? Isn't that the substance that can make you feel relaxed and sleepy?
Yes, that's right. Turkey does contain tryptophan and serotonin, both of which can help you relax. But here's the twist. The amount of tryptophan in turkey isn't actually enough to make you drowsy. In fact, there's more tryptophan in chicken than there is in turkey.
So, we've been blaming the wrong bird all along?
It seems so. Other foods like fish, nuts, and beans also contain tryptophan, but they aren't blamed for making us sleepy, just the turkey. The real cause of the post-Thanksgiving meal stupor isn't the tryptophan in the turkey, but likely the sheer amount of food consumed.
That makes sense. When we overindulge, it's natural to feel sleepy afterward. But why do you think the turkey gets all the blame?
Well, it's likely because of the tradition. Turkey, tryptophan, and Thanksgiving night slumber have become intertwined in American tradition. But it's time we stop blaming the turkey and maybe start acknowledging our holiday overindulgence. So to recap, the sleepiness we feel after a Thanksgiving meal has nothing to do with the turkey itself, but rather the large amount of food consumed. Let's move on to another food-related myth. This one involves the invention of peanut butter. Many people believe that George Washington Carver invented peanut butter. This, however, is not true.
Really? I remember believing that as a child. In fact, I wrote a school report about George Washington Carver's invention of the peanut butter. It's funny how these myths stick with us.
Absolutely. But in reality, peanut butter was used by both the Incas and the Aztecs centuries before Carver was ever born. European explorers documented these peoples mashing peanuts into a paste for food. The honor of the first official peanut butter-related patent goes to a man named John Harvey Kellogg in 1895.
That's hard to believe. So George Washington Carver had nothing to do with peanut butter?
Well, it's not entirely true to say he had nothing to do with it. While he didn't invent peanut butter, he did compile a list of hundreds of uses for peanuts, as well as for soybeans, sweet potatoes, pecans, and more. He was a pioneer in developing theories about crop rotation for better and more sustainable farming. So he's still an important figure in agricultural history, just not the inventor of peanut butter. Now, onto the world of animation. It's commonly believed that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first animated feature-length film. However, while it may have been the first major animated feature released in the United States, it's not the first animated feature ever made.
Really? So what was the first?
That distinction actually goes to a film from Argentina titled El Apostal. Released in 1917, a full 20 years before Snow White, El Apostal was a silent film that used cutout animation.
20 years before Snow White. That's quite a gap. So why isn't it as well known?
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. First, the cutout animation it used was quite different from Disney's celluloid animation, which became the standard after Snow White's release. Furthermore, El Apostal had a limited release and was mostly forgotten, while Snow White had the advantage of massive reach and timing, being released at the end of the Great Depression.
It's a shame that El Apostal and other works of Carino Cristiani, the creator, are largely lost to us now. It would have been fascinating to see the early stages of animation.
Absolutely. Still, it's a testament to the fact that innovation often comes from unexpected places and might be overlooked by mainstream narratives. Now, let's move on to another myth, this one about language. Have you ever heard that Eskimo languages have an extraordinarily high number of words for snow?
Yes, I've heard that they have hundreds of words to describe different types of snow.
That's a common belief, but it turns out to be false. This myth may have originated from the work of a German anthropologist and linguist, Franz Boas. In the early 20th century, he noted that Eskimo languages had many synonyms for snow and related weather phenomena. However, these weren't unique words. They often had the same root word and various variants that could be used differently in unique sentences.
So it's not that they have hundreds of unique words for snow, but rather that they use their language differently.
Exactly. The Inuit and Yupik language groups add suffixes to words, similar to German or Hawaiian. They can make nearly any number of new words by combining suffixes and attaching them to a root word. This allows them to describe snow in many different ways, using the same root word.
That's fascinating. So it's more about the flexibility of the language than an abundance of unique words.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that English also has many words for snow: blizzard, snowfall, avalanche, snowstorm, flurries, snowflake, and so on. The difference lies more in the structure of the languages than in the number of unique words. Now let's dive into the world of famous brands, starting with Adidas. The company was named after its founder, Adolf "Adi" Dassler. The name came from combining the first three letters of his nickname, Adi, with the first three letters of his last name.
That's straightforward. However, I've heard some interesting acronyms for Adidas, like All Day I Dream About Sports or All Day I Dream About Soccer. Are those true?
Well, those are indeed catchy, and the company had a bit of fun with them. However, they're not the actual origin of the name. They are examples of what's known as a backronym, a phrase that is constructed after, not before, the word it supposedly explains. The truth is much simpler. Adi Dassler named the company after himself.
And the adult-themed one, All Day I Dream About Sex, is that also a backronym?
Yes, indeed, another backronym. The company wasn't particularly fond of that one, but it's another example of how a brand's name can inspire creative interpretations.
Fascinating how a simple name can spin off into so many backronyms. Can you give me another example of a backronym?
Sure. A famous example is the car brand Ford. Some say it stands for Fix or Repair Daily, or Found on Road Dead. But Henry Ford simply named the company after himself. So similar to Adidas, any meanings given after are just fun interpretations. Now, this brings us to the term gringo, often used by Spanish speakers to refer to foreigners, particularly people from the United States. There are numerous theories about its origin, including that it's a corruption of the Irish folk song, Green Grow the Lilacs. But these are all incorrect. The term actually comes from the Spanish word griego, which means Greek.
That's interesting. So it's similar to the English phrase, "it's all Greek to me," used when something is difficult to understand.
Exactly. In the 19th century, Spanish speakers used a similar idiom for things that were hard to decipher. They were griego, or Greek to them. Over time, griego morphed into gringo. You know, this reminds me of a recent trip I took to Mexico. When I was there, I was often referred to as a gringo. It wasn't meant to be offensive, just a way to identify me as a foreign visitor.
It's funny you mention that. I had a similar experience when I visited Spain. My Spanish is decent, but my accent is distinctly foreign. So I was also referred to as a gringo on a few occasions. It's fascinating how language evolves and how words can pick up different connotations over time.
Now let's take a trip to Singapore, a country known for its strict laws. One such law is the ban on chewing gum, implemented on January 3, 1992. The objective was to maintain cleanliness in public spaces.
Oh, I've heard about that. If you chew gum in Singapore, you can be corporally punished, right?
That's a common misconception, but no, that's not the case. While corporal punishment is indeed used in Singapore for various offenses, chewing gum isn't one of them. If you're caught chewing gum in public, you'll be fined, but you won't be caned.
So the law isn't against chewing gum, but rather about its sale and production.
Exactly. The law was put in place to crack down on the manufacture and mass sale of gum. So if any of our listeners are planning on traveling to Singapore, rest assured that a mindless pop of a stick of gum won't get you in severe trouble. Just remember to keep it private and don't leave it anywhere it shouldn't be. Well, we have certainly debunked some popular misconceptions today. From what AR and AR-15 really stands for, the truth about the Chevy Nova's success in Latin America, the shelf life of Twinkies, the actual reason we feel drowsy after a Thanksgiving meal, to George Washington Carver's relationship with peanut butter. Don't forget the revelation about the first animated feature-length film and the truth about the Eskimo vocabulary. And of course, the real story behind the origins of the word gringo and Singapore's chewing gum law.
Absolutely. Our journey today proves that things are rarely as simple as they seem. There's always more to the story, and that's what makes our search for knowledge so intriguing.
And speaking of searches, remember folks, if you're looking for the truth, you'll always find it where you least expect it. And sometimes the facts are stickier than a piece of gum on a hot sidewalk in Singapore.
Haha, indeed. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode as much as we have. Don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and share this episode with your friends. Let's continue spreading knowledge together.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring, dear listeners.
Goodbye, everyone. See you in the next episode.
I found these fascinating facts in an article titled 10 Phony Myths and Urban Legends That Just Won't Die, penned by Selmi Angulo on Listverse, published on April 12, 2024. The full URL is in the description if you wish to delve deeper into the subject. Now, signing off.